welcome everyone. I know I keep saying this, but welcome everyone to our May Tobacco Free Tuesday webinar, where we really share a lot of our tobacco best practices with you throughout the state. We welcome you today and we really appreciate you joining us. We've been doing this webinar for over 2 years now. We also started and we've been doing a newsletter for a year. And we would like to get your input on how you feel about this webinar, any new ideas you may have about the timing of it, the information that we share. So we're going to put a survey in the chat now, and then we'll also bring it back up again at the end of the webinar. We will send it out to you during a follow-up for this webinar. Please take some time. It'll take you probably 3 minutes to kind of give your input. Let us know what you want to see from your tobacco control program, as far as webinars, as far as newsletter articles, as far as frequency of the time that we give you the information. We really appreciate your input, and we want to make sure this is relevant to what you're doing in the communities. So please take a few minutes even while we're doing the webinar and fill out the survey. I have the pleasure right now of introducing Dave Ress. And thank you, Dave, for joining us today. Dave is a reporter for the Richmond Times-Dispatch and has written about tobacco since the mid-1990s. So Dave is the person that knows it all about tobacco in Virginia. And I just told him that he's a reporter, and I told him, okay, we have some stories he can write about. So we'll see about that in the future. But he's written about tobacco since the mid-1990s. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from McGill University in Montreal and a PhD in History from the University of New England in Armidale, New South Wales, and is the author of several books, including The Half-Breed Tracts, Governor Edward Coles and the Vote to Forbid Slavery in Illinois, and Deeds, Titles, and Changing Concepts of Land Rights. So a lot of history, a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise that I don't think many of us know. So I think Dave is going to be sharing some information that we may not already know. We're going to ask a few poll questions right before Dave kind of begins his presentation. This is going to be a fairly informal presentation. So if you have questions during his talk, please put them in the chat. Nicole will kind of be monitoring the chat as she always does, and will kind of throughout ask Dave questions if he's talking about a topic that you want more interest, that you want more information on or have a question about. So we're going to start the polls, and I think there are 4 polls, and see your knowledge of tobacco history in Virginia. So the first 2 questions, we'll do these in 2 and then 2 more, I believe, Tiffany, if that's correct. So how many tobacco growers are in Virginia currently? 53, 111, 187, or 253? And where are the tobacco growers mostly located? In the Old Belt, the counties along the North Carolina state line from Mecklenburg to Pennsylvania, in Central Virginia near James River and Louisa County, Southwestern Virginia, Washington, Scott, Lee, Russell, and Smith counties, and in Northern Virginia. So answer those questions. And I'm going to give you the answers as you tell me the answers, but Dave will go into more detail during his presentation as well. So let's see the answer. Okay, that was everybody was kind of torn between those. The true answer is 187. So Dave is going to give us more information on that. And that's based on the Census of Agriculture in 2022. And then where are the tobacco growers mostly located? In the Old Belt. And that's correct, yes. But it was split. There were several different answers. Nobody said Northern Virginia. That's a surprise, shocker. But okay, now the second poll, 2 more questions, and then we will turn it over to Dave. How many cigarettes comes out of Altria's Richmond plant a year? 37 billion, 69 billion, 81 billion, or 95 billion? And how much money does the company get for them? 5 billion, 10 billion, 15 billion, and 20 billion. So quickly put your answer in there. It's a lot of billions right there, whatever you put. Okay, now we will show you the answer. Oh, I'll split again. Okay. Well, the true answer is 69 billion, so a ton. But most people put 81 billion. Okay. And then we scroll down on my chart here. 20 billion was correct. Yes. A lot of money. So thank you for participating in the polls. Dave, thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to turn it over to you to talk through tobacco history in Virginia.
Okay, well, thanks. Glad to talk to folks. I was joking. I have a little camera on my laptop to the side, and I always look at the big screen. So I'm trying. I hope you don't think I'm being rude. And I thought I'd kind of start with a bit of very old stuff and some very new stuff. The old stuff is, kind of we got started growing tobacco in Virginia in about 1610. It was 3 years after they came to Jamestown and discovered there's no gold here. But a few years before that, the king that they named Jamestown for held forth on tobacco. At that point, it was all coming from, I think, Venezuela and becoming a real fad in England. And King James I called it a custom loathsome to the eye, hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain, dangerous to the lungs, and in the black stinking fume thereof, nearest resembling the horrible Stygian smoke of the pit that is bottomless. So I thought that was something that if you didn't know it, you might want to quote at some point. The very new thing is, in fact, just come up overnight. Altria, which is the big cigarette maker, the maker of Marlboro, which is obviously the top brand, is just filed with the Federal Food and Drug Administration for a new vaping product. This one, they say, will include technology, I think it's Bluetooth technology, that restricts, that will lock the device up if it's being used by someone underage. At the same time, they're asking the FDA to reconsider their request for flavored e-vapor pods. In this case, I think it's watermelon and blueberry. I'm sure you guys remember that the question of these kind of flavored vapes is it's a real issue. I mean, the FDA has been really trying to crack down on it. So I wanted to mention this because I think tobacco, where it's been, where it's going, is not, it's not history. It's moving pretty fast, I think. And it's something that, as a result, may be kind of important to you all when you're thinking about cessation efforts in public health. I'm also going to, from time to time, look down at my notes, which is not me being rude, but me trying to remember what I was going to talk about. I'll go on and just add a little bit more about this latest FDA thing, which is it's for a subsidiary of Philip Morris called Enjoy, the letter N, J-O-Y. Altria bought it about a year ago for $2.7 billion. They bought it after they took billions of dollars of losses from a venture with another vaping company called Juul, which you may remember was getting into trouble because of its flavored products and its marketing techniques that FDA considered to be aimed at young people. Altria is already legal, which is one reason why Altria, Enjoy is already legal, which is one reason why Altria bought it. So there's big money at stake, and they're betting big on stuff that's not cigarettes. Cigarettes are still very important to them. And I'll just remind you, you probably know this, but the issue is in a cigarette, you burn tobacco. And when you burn tobacco, you get something like 90 different toxins or carcinogens. The one that always kind of surprises me, shouldn't surprise me, is people, one of the things you inhale is carbon monoxide, which I always assumed people understood is poisonous, fatally poisonous. So The other thing that sort of surprised me though, given that we've got like 400+ years of history of growing tobacco in Virginia and using tobacco in Virginia, that Virginians are slightly less inclined than the national average to smoke. I think about 12.4% of adults in Virginia smoke. The national average is about 11.5. We have about 2.8% of Virginia high school students who smoke and 11,000 who try cigarettes. And you may also know that healthcare costs that generate out of smoking related diseases total about 3.6 billion a year in Virginia. So a little bit of history. If you go down to the heart of the main tobacco belt in Virginia, which is the Old Belt, the South Side area along the state line, you'll see through the summer plants, really big leaves, are about shoulder height. If you go in spring, you'll see these very pretty purple flowers. That's a type of tobacco that's processed as what they call flue cured or bright tobacco. We've been doing that really since the 1830s. It was a way of curing tobacco that was discovered by an accident by a slave who left leaves to dry in a shed that he heated up with a stove. There's another type of tobacco. So some of the folks in the poll who are talking about Southwest are probably thinking of a smaller plant, which turns into burley tobacco, which accounts for about 25 or 30% of an American style tobacco cigarette. It gives it its, I used to smoke, so American style tobacco cigarettes have a slightly sharper edge than Canadian style, which are 100% flue cured. I used to smoke Canadian style. So, if you're thinking about the Old Belt, kind of centered on Danville, if you go up Route 360 for about 180, 190 miles, you'll end up driving past the Philip Morris USA Manufacturing Center. Altria, which is the parent of Philip Morris USA. Forgive me if I sometimes mix up the terms. It is important to remember that there's a separate company called Philip Morris International, which doesn't operate until quite recently in the United States. And in the United States, that's only going to be for non-cigarette tobacco products. I'm going to be focusing here on Altria, Philip Morris USA. Please excuse any slips of the tongue. The Philip Morris plant, Philip Morris USA plant in South Richmond is really big. It's they make really billions and billions of cigarettes a year. A lot of cigarettes, fewer than they used to, but there's still a lot. They do it with a kind of machine that they're elaborate machines, but they're about 150-year-old technology. So stuff hasn't moved that fast in tobacco. The main tobacco ingredient is something that was developed in 1830s. The main machine that can take really thin cigarette paper and stuff it with sliced up tobacco is about 150 years old. And most of that tobacco most of the tobacco in the cigarettes at the Richmond plant come from the Old Belt. They come from that Southside Virginia, with a little bit that comes from the burley that comes from Southwest Virginia and Kentucky. You should know, and if you don't, I'll tell you, there's a lot fewer people who smoke these days than when I was a kid. 50 years ago, it was something like 4 out of 10 American adults smoked. Kyle, I just saw your chat, and I think I did a slip of the tongue earlier. Virginians actually smoke slightly more than the national average. My apologies for any confusion there. At 12.4% of Virginia adults, 11.5% of American adults. Sorry for the confusion. And I don't really know why. There does tend to be in tobacco producing states, North Carolina, for instance, people do smoke a little bit more than the national average. The national average is affected, I think, largely by the pattern in California, and I think in the northeastern states, where I believe off the top of my head, the percentage of adults who smoke is like approaching the single digits. So apologies again for the confusion. But it's a lot less than 50 years ago when 4 out of 10 American adults did smoke. And at the same time, there's been a decline in the number of farms that are producing tobacco, 187. Once upon a time in 1997, which is a key year because that's just before something called the Master Tobacco Settlement, there were more than 6,000 in Virginia. There's been a lot of change down there, and a lot of it, has to do with some longer term trends as general public awareness of the hazards of smoking grew through the 60s and 70s. And then in 1998, we had the very significant move of the Master Tobacco Settlement. That was basically multiple states settling multiple lawsuits against tobacco companies on the grounds of seeking a return for money that the Medicaid system spent dealing with smoking-related disease. Part of what was said at the time was that this money would go for healthcare purposes and for tobacco cessation efforts. The Master Settlement Agreement has raised billions of dollars. I kind of suspect you guys aren't getting billions of dollars. A lot of the money over the years, it's been a while since I looked at it, but when I did in the late 90s and early aughts, in a lot of states it was going to pave highways and that kind of stuff. But one thing that did happen is the price of cigarettes went up a lot. A pack in Virginia now costs about $7.70. That's a little bit below the national average, which is about $8.50, which again probably gets to the question of why Virginians may smoke a little bit more than the national average. It's a lot less than New York's, which is more than $12. And before the Master Tobacco Settlement in 1998, a pack of cigarettes cost about $2. So I think that goes a long way to explaining why tobacco use is down a lot from what it used to be. And that was also really probably the fundamental purpose of the Master Tobacco Settlement from a public policy point of view. Part of what's changed too is that the way the public sees cigarettes and the way they're marketed has really changed. It's not out there anymore. You don't see billboards, you don't see advertisements in magazines. A lot more of the marketing is kind of done on a online basis. There does tend to be some age verification involved, but the sponsoring sports events, advertising, it doesn't happen anymore. There's still a lot of spending on reaching smokers, and they still smokers, although there are fewer of them. Yep, Kyle, that's billions is right. 25.9. And over the years, it's been in the I think hundreds of billions. My apologies. Cigarettes still matter a lot to Altria and to the other cigarette makers, Reynolds American, lost track of where Liggett and Myers and Laureate but I think they're with British American Tobacco, which is big here too. But for Altria, they account for about 90% of their operating income. And the revenue that they got from cigarettes was $22.5 billion in 2023. The interesting thing, though, is what happens with that revenue. Kind of after you take on the costs of making cigarettes, all those fancy machines that can manage to stuff flimsy paper with tobacco, and the advertising and the rest of it. Their operating income is like $10 billion. If any of you are like into business, that's a really big gross margin pocket, operating margin. It's a lot of money. It's makes cigarettes really important to Altria. And Altria's out there in a big way. They have a field force of about 1,600 salespeople who are visiting something like 200,000 stores with ideas about how to place cigarettes in a prominent place, how to have the posters up that market it, and as well, how to deal. Altria says they work real hard with enforcing the various states' laws about selling to underage, including things like technology that is supposed to be able to read like a driver's license and say, yeah, you're old enough to buy cigarettes or you're not. I think, if I remember right, there's something like about 135,000 stores that actually participate in this program. Going back down the road towards the Old Belt, tobacco was a long time, from 1607 on to about 2003, the leading cash crop for farmers in Virginia. It isn't anymore, but it is still an important export product. The way people use tobacco in the United States is different than in other countries. And a lot of where the tobacco in the Old Belt goes these days is places like China and Japan, where smoking incidence is a lot higher. I know a fair number of tobacco farmers and retired farmers down there, and they tell me, and I'm a credulous sort, so I believe this, that the tobacco from the Virginia Old Belt is the highest quality in the world, and that's why there's international demand for it. A lot of what's in cigarettes, particularly outside the United States, comes from other places in the world where this kind of flue-cured tobacco is grown. There's a lot grown in Zimbabwe and Malawi. But Altria says what's in theirs is American tobacco, and particularly Old Belt, because that's where the flavor is best. But when you go from 6,000 growers in Virginia to 187, that means there's some big changes been going on. Some of that is in the scale of the operation of the people who remain. Tobacco's always been something where you can pull a lot of dollars out of an acre of crop, which is one reason why it's been attractive. It's also meant that you could have a viable farm operation on fairly few acres. I have heard of growers who back in the day were probably wasn't their main business, but they were an important supplement of cash for like 10 acres. A lot of people in the Old Belt made money by owning land and renting it out, and owning land which came with an associated quota of how much tobacco they could sell at a minimum guaranteed price, and then rent that out to people who are actually growing tobacco. I think the average plot was probably about 30 to 50 acres, which For anyone who's from farm country, you know, for any other crop is just unsustainable. Now though, to do tobacco, farmers are operating on a much larger scale, hundreds of acres. It's a little bit tougher to do in the old belt because it's hilly. So there's been some migration of tobacco growing east of Interstate 95 where the soil is flatter. And according to my old belt buds, the quality isn't as high, but you know, it's still food grade tobacco. But the other thing that's going on is when you operate on that kind of scale, you can't, you know, curing the tobacco becomes a different process too. So 30 acres, you have one of those old wooden sheds you might see down if you go down the back roads of Pennsylvania County. You might have one shed for your farm, can't do that anymore. One guy I talked to for the story that I think prompted y'all's interest. He had like 300 acres. He had 41 curing barns. They're also curing barns of a different nature. They're not a wooden shed with a stove. They're metal sheds. They have forced air, hot air coming in. They have automated controls that vary the amount of heat coming in by checking what the humidity is inside and so forth. Part of this is an allegation that when you do it that way, you get fewer nitrosamines in the tobacco, which is probably the primary cancer causing ingredient. That was a big thing a few years ago when folks like Johnny Williams were talking about I can make a safer cigarette. You guys probably know where a lot of that safer cigarettes talk kind of went, but the technology that was aimed at reducing nitrosamines is how, if you're operating on that kind of scale of the raw leaf that you're growing, you gotta process it. So there's big money involved. Generally these days, what I'm told is that you can pull about $5 grand an acre off of tobacco in the old belt. Anything else that's grown down there, it's about $500. But you know, that does come with a big capital investment and a labor investment because you got to pick the stuff, and a lot of that is done by temporary workers who come in under the H-2B visa program. It's nasty work too. Part of it is it has to be, for the very best stuff is handpicked because different leaves mature at different times and they're useful for cigarette making at different points in their growth. It's nasty too because if you don't wear gloves, the sap, which contains nicotine, will make you sick. Nicotine is in fact a poison. Pure nicotine in small enough doses in the bloodstream kills you. It just does. That labor is about 65% of a grower's cost. The price of tobacco that they get is down as well. Before the master settlement agreement, they were getting about $3 a pound in current dollars. That's adjusted for inflation. It's now running about $2.50. So that explains kind of the scale. It explains why there's a lot fewer tobacco growers. And bear with me, I'm looking at the time. I hope I'm not running too long. I warned everyone that I'm long-winded.
No, you're good, Dave. You're perfect. You're right on time.
Okay, good. One of the things that has tobacco growers who are staying with the business in the old bill, feeling that there's a future for them, is that there's new ways of using tobacco that they think the high quality of their what they say is the high quality of their tobacco. I'm become a Virginia patriot, so I'll agree with them. means that there's going to be, even if there's less tobacco in some of some of these new products, which I'll discuss in a minute, the higher quality is going to make them more. Those new products are what go back upward 360 towards the Philip Morris plant in Altria. That's where Altria says it sees a lot of its future. Here we get into stuff that's probably there's lots of different views about. It's hard for a lot of people in the public health arena to feel really comfortable when Altria says we will tell people right from the start that smoking is bad for you. We're working and see our future in reduced harm products. Because you remember those billions of cigarettes and the 50% of revenue that you get that's basically operating profit. But Altria does say that it is focusing on what it calls reduced harm products, and that it is clear that smoking cigarettes is bad for you, is fatal in many cases. So what are some of those new products? Is that e-cigarette product, the Enjoy product that we talked about right at the start. Enjoy does have FDA approval for its electronic device and for a couple of the pods that it uses, which are tobacco flavor. Remember, Altria is hoping that, at least the way I'm reading what their latest news is they are hoping that having an electronic device that can lock out underage users means it can go ahead with legitimately asking for sweet flavored pods. I'll leave you to make a value judgment on that. Because I cover this industry, I really try hard not to have value judgments. There's 1,700 people in the Philip Morris USA plant in South Richmond. They make all of the Marlboro cigarettes that are sold in the United States. It's the top brand. It's about 40% of the market. It's a brand that matters a lot. If you're into business history, it's probably the most famous branding success, because back, I think in the 20s, what was then Philip Morris turned around a cigarette that had been branded as a cigarette for women into the cowboy smoking cigarette that we know and love. One product that actually they're also starting to make experiment with, this is still very new in Richmond, is a product called On, which is it's going to process tobacco and extract nicotine, and then insert that into kind of a plant-based fiber that will go into a pouch that you stick in your mouth. Altria spent more than $600 million acquiring this technology, and it's actually grown pretty fast. I think, I'm going off the top of my head here, so bear with me, but I think the unit sales for that are up like about 30% as of the start of this year compared to the year before. Its other oral tobacco products, which include things like Copenhagen snuff, which is a 200-year-old product, and Stole, are on the slide. It's worth thinking about that, because I think the public at large kind of responds to tobacco use in a lot of different ways. So traditional ways of using tobacco, by dipping snuff or chewing leaf, I bet you're going to have a really hard time finding leaf tobacco anymore. You have to go way in the country to see that. So a lot of Altria's research and a lot of these different products that may not feel that different are about thinking of that instant in which a consumer with maybe different priorities wants to get his or her nicotine fix. and how they feel about perceptions about taste, about the feel, about stigma, are why some of these products have different uses. I don't know if any of you are smokers. Watch a smoker sometime and think of it as a little bit of the ritual. In many cases, the cigarette tap on the pack, that first deep inhale that a smoker will do, the sigh of satisfaction. These are all very typical things that you'll see when people smoke. And what they're about is that there's more than just the physiological effect of that nicotine hitting the back of your upper palate and going right to the brain. That's about what keeps people hooked. And so some of these products, e-cigarettes are one example of that, are about kind of replicating that kind of multiple perception signal and multiple and physiological signal that keep people smoking. And in this case, we should start saying keep people using nicotine. So dipping and chewing tobacco are out. Smoking cigarettes is something that people who smoke, many of them feel awkward about. They can't smoke in many places. E-cigarettes are one answer to that. Another answer that Altria is working on is what are called heated tobacco sticks. They don't like it when I call them this, but they're like mini cigarettes. They're little tubes filled with tobacco. Back on the old belt that the farmers are saying, boy, that's, they're going to really want, without that much tobacco, a higher proportion of our high quality stuff. You put it in an electric device that heats but doesn't burn your tobacco. And the theory is that if you heat, you don't get many of the carcinogens, the carbon monoxide, all that nasty stuff that burning tobacco and a cigarette lead to. I've seen what some of the scientific studies that Altria brings to the FDA that talk about how much less of that nasty stuff is getting inhaled. I'm not good enough, and I haven't talked to enough people who are good enough yet to really dig into that. But it is an important, it's one of the 4 or 5 different prongs of different kinds of tobacco products that Altria is exploring. And in this case, it's like the sense is that this gives you more of a tobacco taste than, say, an e-vape, unless it's flavored like tobacco would. It also feels more like a cigarette, so you can do all the handling stuff. There's another new product that they're working on called Swick, which is going to have a capsule, rather like the pods that e-vapes use. But the capsule will have, and rather like the capsule that will be in the on pouch, that these will be capsules full of tobacco. And the idea is that this is more like the tobacco flavor that people want. So you can see there's different ways of getting at what they have told me they see as like 7 different types of cigarette users who might be interested in a reduced harm product. What they will call a reduced harm product, I will leave the debate to people who know more than I do about that.
Dave,
Yeah.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
the IQOS is that heat not burn product, right?
Mhm.
And then can you explain the Swick one again? So you said it's kind
Sure.
of like how the e-cigarette has a capsule, but instead of liquid, it's like a pouch?
Yeah, it'll be a pouch. It's supposed to have tobacco in it. It's supposed to be heated. So there's going to have to be an electronic device that heats it up. It's like handheld. The prototypes I've seen, because I think they're still experimenting with this, they're pretty close, is Probably looks a lot like a vape product. It's sort of a round, like a handheld, plastic sort of, curved rectangular shape, egg shaped, I guess, except kind of longer.
And would
Which
that have smoke coming out of it, like how an e-cig, like you inhale and exhale?
I think, I don't think it would be smoke because you're not burning it. So,
Yeah.
I haven't seen one of these in operation, but I think, you'd heat the tobacco, you'd inhale it. What you'd breathe out would probably look pretty much like what you breathe out anyway. I don't think there shouldn't be particulates in it, which is what smoke is. Um, but I haven't actually seen it in operation. This is actually something that during the General Assembly session got Philip Morris International, whatever, they're different from Altria going, because Philip Morris International has a product rather like this. Um, I think they call it IQOS, that they want to introduce in the United States. And the flap in the General Assembly was going to be, how do you tax this? And so there was a lot of, nobody quite going on the record saying this, but a lot of nudge, nudge. We want to get in. Altria wants to keep us out. Altria saying, no, we don't. This is all about making sure we get the proper taxation so we get the master settlement agreements. There's, as you guys can probably tell, there can be a lot of rhetoric swirling around tobacco and tobacco control issues, and that was this year's version. So, that particular issue, the lead on that was the state attorney general's office, and the concern really was if you don't tax heated tobacco properly, then the cigarette companies that are paying into the master settlement agreement will say, we're being treated unfairly. We're not gonna go with the taxes. So, yeah, that was what was going on.
Interesting, because it was a few years ago, it was after General Assembly, we found out that they actually, in the Virginia code, they changed the definition of cigarette. And Gina, you can correct me if I'm getting this a little off, but the definition of cigarette is it has to burn. Dave, I feel like you probably know what I'm talking about. So that's interesting you bring up like how the issue was how to tax this heat not burn product. So that's interesting to kind of see all the different pieces kind of align, years down the line. So
I think if I remember right, a couple years back when they started trying to distinguish between cigarettes that burn and cigarette looking like things that don't burn, was should tax policy reflect an assertion that something is a reduced harm product? And that gets to be the kind of policy question I imagine you guys have to wrestle with, because there is the question of, is any kind of delivery of nicotine a public health issue? Is any kind really reduced harm? There is, I think it's fair to say there's a lot of fairly strong feelings about that. And which is something that Altria spends a lot of time trying to address. And something I'm not going to get into what my opinion is.
Dave, can I ask a quick question while we're on the products? The
Yeah.
very first thing you said during this the webinar, you mentioned that they're testing a device, a lock device, where if you are underage, it locked itself.
Yeah.
Did I hear that right? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what they say they're trying to do at the convenience stores to reduce or eliminate, they hope eliminate, or they say they hope eliminate underage purchase of cigarettes. The idea is apparently kind of using Bluetooth technology, some kind of read of a government issue at the stores, Bluetooth, some kind of read of a government issued ID that says you can sell or you can't sell. The latest is a device that's incorporated into an e-cigarette electronic device somehow that would use some kind of Bluetooth technology that would lock out an underage user using using the device to smoke a pod. That's all I know right now. I have a hard time sort of imagining how that would work. It would seem to have some kind of link to who bought the product and how it was verified at the time. It's hard to see how it would, if I bought that product and a teenager used my device to e-vape, how that would work. I don't know if it would or not. Like I
Yeah,
said,
thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to make sure I heard you right with that.
yeah, and, I
Thank
think, I mean, Altria is very, will emphasize a lot what it's trying to do with convenience stores and age verification for cigarettes, which probably gets at the same kind of fundamental policy question I think I imagine a lot of people in public health have, which is really, and I had not really sure I've got a good answer on this. If you've got a product that or products that deliver nicotine that you say are not going to be delivering nicotine, whether it's smoke burning cigarettes or heated tobacco or any of this other stuff, to underage people. And sooner or later, there aren't going to be any users of nicotine. And then what? To be honest, I've yet to get the clearest answer about that. There, as a consequence of what that suggests, there's a fair amount of skepticism in the public health sector about how serious companies like Altria is not the only one who's exploring these other products, are about really not recruiting new users of tobacco. Or perhaps I should say more precisely, new users of nicotine delivered in varying ways by tobacco. So that's a policy question. I don't know the answer to. I really don't. I think I've gone through my notes and what I wanted to talk about. I don't know whether I've run over time or not. And I don't know whether I've been too long.
You're right on time, Dave. So perfect. We did have one question in the Q&A that kind of came up, and it kind of goes along with what you just talked about big tobacco. And so Neely, so she was she was on our team before, now she's with EVA Cancer Center. But she asked, do you find big tobacco research skewed to their favor? Can you speak on that?
Let me dodge a little bit. I'm not a biochemist, and I'm not I don't know anything about physiology. I know that some of the people that Altria has employed to do this research, things like those studies that assert that heated tobacco doesn't produce anything like the kind of toxins and carcinogens that burning tobacco does. I know they're not smokers. I know they come from academic backgrounds. On the other hand, whether it's Altria or Reynolds or British American Tobacco, all of whom are exploring these alternatives for what they're going to call reduced harm products. They've got a lot at stake in this. And when studies have a lot at stake in this, you gotta wonder. And I honestly don't know if it's skewed. I'm just not competent to judge. I will say that these are the studies that FDA will use in its very complex regulatory process for getting products into the United States. A process that I find very hard to understand, but it starts with, their preliminary marketing orders, the PMTAs. If I knew what I was talking about, I know what PMTA stood for off the top of my head. I have to look it up. But the things to sort of say, well, you can sell this stuff while we really dig into whether we should do it marketing order to allow it. I think the FDA is a lot more competent than I am to figure out whether the studies are valid or not. I know a lot of studies and a lot of applications, even for the preliminary approval, don't get done. Thank you. I should know that pre-market tobacco product application. Now I know. Thanks, Nicole. And on the other hand, I also know there's a lot of products, and this is something else that Altria is pushing very hard on, that are being sold in the United States, and particularly vapes, that the FDA has no clue about. They've never been tested. They've never been applied. They're often sold online or in vape stores. In a business sense, there's lawsuits in California where Altria is saying there's unfair competition. You got to wonder if you're inhaling stuff that the Food and Drug Administration has not actually looked at what you're inhaling, how smart that is, but I'm assuming that's something that people who are involved with secession will be talking to kids about, because I do think kids get hold of this stuff. So long-winded answer, my apologies. Did it sort of help?
Yeah, thank you for that, Dave. Yeah, definitely. And people question, they have the data, they have the research, and they're trying to create, a smoke-free generation, as you mentioned, and everything else. But they're still creating these other nicotine delivery systems, right? And so it kind of makes you think, what really is their end goal? And you kind of think about the tobacco farmers too, about how, have and in your article you talk about all these different acts and different things that tobacco growers have been able to, switch off. And there's been incentives, I guess, for them to switch to other crops, or not. I guess some families have probably moved on to something else. So I wish we had more time for you to talk about it, but we'll try to link your articles. And I think you have to have a membership to see them, but we're going to try like a workaround for people to share, because I think your articles have really give way more detailed information about what you talked about today. It's just time. We only have so much time. So we appreciate you for sharing everything and answering the questions that we did have time for. And we'll include your email, Dave, so if people want to reach out. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's an easy one. You got to promise not to laugh. It's dress, DRESS, at timesdispatch.com. Yeah, I'm happy to
Perfect.
answer questions, and pretend that I know what I'm talking about, even if I have to get a nice hint about what PMTA actually stands for.
No, it's okay. We'll all get that way. We're all a team, trying to help each other out. Sometimes it's at the tip of your tongue all the time, right?
It was
So
the case.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dave. And I'll pass this on to Gina to wrap us up for the day.
Thank you, Nicole. And thank you, Dave, so much. If you have 1 minute or maybe 30 seconds, I did have one final question. So you've been doing this for 30 years in tobacco, right? And you've seen it the past 30 years. What do you see the next 5 years? In 5 years, how will tobacco look in Virginia? With Altria, with the growers? Can you even envision that?
5 years is easier than 30. For 5 years, I don't see a ton of change. There'll be a few fewer smokers because of the usual things. Of the new products that are perceived as alternatives, it takes a long time to get them to market. We'll probably see the heated tobacco sticks, the mini cigarettes, some of the other pouches. Well, the pouches we already see, the capsules with tobacco in it that they're still working on, probably some years down the pike. And they'll have to be, we're talking about a lot of people having to shift what they do. 5 years, I don't see a big change. 30 years, I don't know.
I know it will be interesting to see, and we will be working hard to kind of reduce that tobacco use so there are no young people that are doing it, and therefore no older people that are using tobacco. And hopefully that will be the future. But thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you all that have joined the webinar. Please stay tuned next month, June 18th. We're going to have Colleen Hughes, whom I know several of you know and have heard from. Excited to hear from her to discuss a new online training merchant education module for tobacco retailers, right? Getting back into the stores and how Colleen and her team can do that work also in the stores. So excited to hear from her. Please join us and share the information on June the 18th. Again, one more plug for our survey. Please fill it out. Please take some time. We will put that in the follow-up email out to you because we really want your input about how to make our webinars and our newsletters something that you can really take from and use in your communities. As always, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your May and head into summer. I wish you to get outside today. It's going to be about 80 degrees in my area. I think probably in your area as well. So enjoy it. Get outside and just kind of get out with nature, as you know, can actually reduce your stress, right? For tobacco users, reduce stress. For anybody, reduce stress. So enjoy your day. Have a wonderful one, and we will see you back in June. Bye, everyone.